Dan, it went right down to the wire, but you're officially a Saint. How does it feel, mate?
Yeah, pretty exciting. My heart was beating pretty fast towards the end of the trade period, but pretty stoked to be a Saint and really looking forward to it.
Picture surface of you online over in Bali with the new colours on. Did you take that jumper over with you?
Nah, one of the boys actually went to a market in Bali and picked it up for about $10, and was just waiting for the trade to go through, then chucked it on and got the photo. So yeah, pretty stoked.
And what drew you to Moorabbin?
It probably started with rats and gags. They were really good to me in my meetings with them, and I suppose it's a great part of Melbourne. The facilities here are unbelievable and a real young and exciting group, so looking forward to being a part of it.
Well, it was a massive trade period for the Saints. 5 players in, 3 players out. Still more to play out over the journey as we get sort of closer to the draft. But we are delighted to have our first in-studio guest, Steve Lennie, the AFL Pro Scouter, looking at talent within the AFL system, so not so much the next generation draftees, but those that are looking to make the move and those that perhaps might be gettable. And it was a very fruitful and productive period for the Saints. Steve, thanks for jumping in and joining us.
Pleasure, guys.
Now, one that I'm sort of curious on, with the amount of players that have nominated St Kilda, so some we knew about for a while, Brad Hill, Zach Jones, some we didn't find out about until a little bit later on. How does that process work? I mean, we pick up the paper or jump on Twitter and Dougal Howard has nominated St Kilda. Now, I'm sure you don't get a phone call from Dougal Howard saying, I want to play for your club. Clearly, there'd be other steps along the way. So how does that come about that Dougal Howard is on the radar and then comes to notify?
Well, every player is different. It's some of the players are in contracts, some of them aren't in contracts. So James Gallagher is always in contact with the managers during the course of the year, and we will have identified the type of player that we wanted, probably 12 months out for the list needs. So then you just stay in contact with the managers, and if they're in contract, sometimes the managers bring them up to you, or you ask about them, and they might say, look, he's looking to move, or so forth. That's probably the general rule of thumb, is that James just stays in contact with the managers most of the time.
Basically, who really gets like the last say in who we pick up and how we're going to deal with them coming in and all that sort of thing?
Well, it's all done through list management. We have our list management meetings probably every 3 weeks. Players are discussed, positions are discussed, strategies is discussed as far as going forward, all that sort of thing. So it's not something it's generally a consensus, what we need to get, what's available. One of my main roles is to make sure I identify the right types of players that we're looking at, and the type of players that will help us in the future. So, I'll bring up these players, James will bring up players, and then we'll discuss who's the right fit, and then we'll go to work and do the work on the players.
So you mentioned identifying those kind of main players that we target. Who kind of comes up with the requirements for the type of player? Is it James Gallagher or Simon Lethlean that says we need a wingman that's 22 to 26 years old, or kind of how does that process work?
Well, it's a list management strategy that you sit down and work out where you need to take the club, what you need to do with the list, and your strategy then is based around that. So you're trying to fill certain needs, and really the Pro Scout part of it and the trade period part of it is filling the gaps. When you get to the draft, it's bringing in talent, really. So we identify the gaps in our list, where we need to get better. There's input from the coaches. And we make a decision on the type of player that we need to get. Then we group that type of player together and go and do the work on them by watching them play, yeah.
So we know contracts don't matter perhaps as much as they used to. I know contracts are contracts, but you've seen players move that might be sort of 2 or 3 years into a contract. When you're scouting players, is that now a case where you'd look at somebody, Brad Hill, for example, who had years to run on his contract, and in the past you would have thought, well, that's the type of player we need, but he's got years to run on his contract, so we wouldn't have even looked at that? Or is it a case of we need leg speed, and these are 6 or 7 guys that we think are gettable regardless of how long they might have left on a deal?
Yeah, generally, look, the contracted players are generally not on your target lists, but you're actually watching them. Part of my role is to make sure I'm over the top of every single player in the competition, because quite often you'll start the year off with a target list of players that you need to fill your needs, and you'll be watching the other players at the same time. But then maybe halfway during the year, a manager will call Gags or James will speak to some of the managers, and they'll say, look, this guy wants to get home or whatever, and then therefore you jump on board and start doing the work from that point of time, as long as that person fills the needs that you've got.
Yeah, so say a player does come up on the radar for the team and we're thinking about it, but along the lines of, say, Dougal Howard, he's not playing AFL at that time. If you don't think he's going to get another game, that sort of stuff, do you personally fly it yourself, or do you get someone to go get vision, or how do you go view what he's doing at that point to see whether, yes, he's going to fit into the team? Yeah,
Dougal's an interesting case. We've been following Dougal for a couple of years. We really like Dougal all the way through. We knew he was a contracted player. But he sort of fitted one of the needs that we had, which was a last line defender, another key defender. So he whilst he wasn't on the list, we've always liked what he did.
Kept an eye on him, yep.
Yeah, and kept an eye on him. It just so happened that towards the end of the year, they couldn't find a spot for him in their defensive side of their game, and they pushed him forward. And then from there, he went out of the side into the sandful, and we'd been following him through that whole period. So it sort of a few things fell into place. So then we were able to sort of take the opportunity to get in contact and find out what was going on. And
Yep.
Where do you see Dougal's best footy? I mean, obviously he's been used a bit forward, a bit back at Port, and he's kind of, in the media they talk about him being a swingman and that sort of stuff. As kind of the guy who's charged with watching him and kind of creating the dossier on this guy, what's your view on what his best position is?
Well, we've got him to play down back as a key defender. He's got some fantastic attributes of speed, agility, his athletic abilities, his ability to mark the footy and then spoil the footy as well. So he fitted that purpose for us perfectly. We know he can play a little bit forward. Doesn't get as much of the ball forward, but he can take a really good contested mark and hit the scoreboard. And he has played a little bit in the ruck as well. Unfortunately, he did his knee when he did, but I mean, he has played in the ruck. So he's a very versatile player. So he fitted a need for us absolutely down back, and that's where we see him playing.
So when we see situations like McCartan stepping away from footy for a year, we know St Kilda have got Ryder in to sort of assist in a ruck forward role, and Max King we haven't seen play yet. But then Jack Nunes obviously exercises his rights to leave the club. Do you then sit down and go to work again and go, well, we've got this many delisted free agents that are mature recruits in the competition that might be able to serve that purpose, be it hypothetically, I don't know, a Connor Menageau or something like that, and then you go back to work again and think, well, we either go to the draft or we go and get someone mature.
Yeah, absolutely. And we plan ahead for this sort of thing. We try and foresee that that's going to happen down the track and make sure we've got players covered to fill those roles if we need to go and get them.
Now, the trade period itself, when you yourself, do you head into Etihad when they have it, at Marvel, when they have it there and get into the rooms and everything? I mean, from the outside, we see the first week and a bit's not much sounds like it's happening, but how busy is that period really?
Well, from my point of view, from my role, it's not that busy for me. All my work's already done, evaluating players and so forth. For James Gallagher and for Simon Lethlean, it's a huge period of time for them. They're very busy because they're actually contacting other clubs even prior to the trade week and then during trade week trying to get things done. So for them, it's really a really busy time.
Yeah, would they, in case a name does quickly come up out of nowhere, they'll sort of get onto you and ask things?
Yeah, they will, but generally that doesn't happen because you've already spoken to all the clubs and you've spoken to all the managers, so going into trade week who's going to be available. Very rarely do you get someone get thrown up at late notice, to be honest.
We might take a step back and I mean, as the guy that's kind of charged with our pro recruiting in that regard, maybe give our listeners a bit of a background check on your history and where you've come from. And I guess a lot of fans probably never have heard your name. So why don't you give us a bit of a history on where you've come from and what you've been doing kind of since you got into footy?
Yeah, well, I played some under-19 and reserve footy at the VFL level, and then I played football out in the eastern suburbs for East Burwood until I was about 25, 26, and my knees gave away, so then I gave it away. And then I got into some coaching, and I coached Wandon for 3 years up at the Yarra Valley Mountain District. I coached Mitcham and East Burwood in the Eastern League. From there, I went to Coburg as an assistant to Alan Richardson in the VFL, did the forwards and a bit of opposition stuff there, and then followed him to the Bulldogs, where I again did a bit of opposition, and I had a match day role in the box, working with Peter Rode and Rocket Eade. They were part-time roles. And from there I went to Collingwood and did a couple of years in recruiting, mainly doing the state league stuff for Collingwood in a couple of years. And what happens is along the way you meet all the coaches and you get a bit of a network going. And I was lucky enough to have Chris Bond give me a call when I was at Collingwood, I think in 2009, asked me to do the opposition over at Fremantle for full-time role for... I've been there I was there for 8 years, I suppose, full-time.
Yeah, right.
And then the last year and a quarter, 3 quarters, I've been at St Kilda. I started in March, 2 years ago, yeah.
So a couple of off-track questions. What's Rocket like in the box? And secondly, what's it like working with Ross Lyon? You hear that he's a bit of a hard taskmaster.
Yeah, Ross is a hard taskmaster, but I mean, it does make you better. He's someone who he strives for excellence, and if you're working for him, you've got to do the same. I really learned a hell of a lot from Ross in the period of time I was working for him. Probably learnt more in footy from him than anybody else, and I really enjoyed my time working for Ross. Rocket, as far as the box goes, yeah, 2 different people, Rocket.
Yeah.
He's a fantastic bloke outside the box, inside the box. And I used to sit next to him doing the board in the box, so, I used to cop the sprays all the time. But, he sort of ran out a little bit towards the end.
Yeah, there's a few famous sound bites from Rocket in the box.
Yeah, but it's always fun. But outside of the box, he's completely different.
Yeah, we've heard him dispute that, but we've heard his players suggest that had to have been him based on that. In terms of your analytics, I mean, I think the best judge is generally the eye, but how much do you use data and things like that? Would you be someone where if you're looking at a play, you get a full rundown of numbers and GPS and all of that sort of stuff, or is it just simply a case of I watch his one-on-one work, I do this, and I think he's the right fit for us?
Yeah, it's a mixture of all. I use a lot of data. Then I go and watch live, and then I'll go back and watch the vision again. So yeah, it's a bit of everything for me. I like the data. I think the data steers you in the right direction, and then it's a matter of going and ticking the boxes and looking live, and then just going and having a look again. And as far as the vision goes, so we use all of those areas.
Does it ever come into conflict where it's the numbers are telling you that a player might not be up to it, for example, but your eyes telling you, look, there's something there that I really rate in this particular player, and sometimes you're in conflict saying, well, everyone's saying one thing, but what I'm seeing with my own eyes is suggesting that maybe we take a punt?
Yeah, I think the data doesn't lie, so it's more the other way around. I think the data will take you to where you want to go, and then you have a look with your eye, and you either tick it off or you say, no, I don't agree with that. Because there can be, there's data and there's data, and how you use that data is really important. But yeah, I use it quite a bit and then follow it up with what I see.
So the club brought in Darren O'Shaughnessy at the start of last season to head up a new analytics department. How closely do you guys work with him and his team in terms of your recruiting roles? Yeah,
very closely. Yeah, Darren does a lot of work for the recruiting side of things as well as the game day analytical work he does. We have rating systems for every player in the competition and grading systems. And Darren's helped build all of that for us and put his expertise into that. So we think we've got a pretty good system now where we can save a lot of time. We can get the right results from players spat out as far as data goes.
How much have the new facilities been used as a bit of a lure for some players? Because I've heard it's, in comparison to most teams in the league now, we're sort of moved ahead of most of them. And we've still got more development coming up as well with the new Lure stand coming in, and it's just going to be a central hub there for players to use when they want. And has it been really pushed on any players much? Or
it hasn't really been pushed on, but I think it's significant moving back into Moorabbin and being near the Bay Area. It's something that you can really sell to players if you're trying to get to them to the club, and the new facility is certainly something you can sell to them as well. It makes it a lot easier.
Yep.
But then on top of that, you still got to do the work and present the right way to the player, and in order to get them to want to come over and play. But it certainly has helped.
Yep.
We looked this season, and of course, as you say, it is home, but so St Kilda brings in some ruck depth in Ryder, a small forward in Butler, a bit of pace in Jones, and clearly Brad Hill and a key position defender. So in terms of the boxes you wanted to tick, have you ticked all of them, or are there still areas where, I mean, I know it's constant improvement, but did you come in with a plan and effectively nail all parts of the puzzle?
Yeah, we were happy with what we did. We've got to be a little bit patient. It's not going to happen overnight. We've got to change quite a few areas. We're certainly a list that needs to get better at the top end. And it's a clear indicator for success that the clubs with the top end talent are the ones that are being successful. So we've chipped away at that. We needed to address some midfield run and speed and talent, and we've certainly done that with Brad Hill and Zach Jones. We needed also to add more run connection from our forward line to our midfield, and Dan Butler will give us that. Everybody knows about the Paddy Ryder one. It's going to help. It's going to help Rowan. It's going to certainly help him. So we needed to bring in someone that we could use like that with Paddy. And of course, as I said before, with Dougal, we sort of looked at a last line defender or a key defender as being critical going forward, especially with getting some older players in on the list.
So with a player going out, so Jack Stephen nominates Geelong. In the end, it's for a pick. But when that becomes apparent, so Jack Stephen comes to the club and says, I want to go to Geelong, does the club go to you and say, if we were to get a player from Geelong, who best serves our needs? So if we need speed or youth, who are 4 names that we could put on the list for them and say, this might get it done? Is that sort of something that would happen?
Yeah, not really like that. It'll be that I'll identify that that's a club that's looking at Jack, and I'll just make sure I've done a bit more work on that whole list, so that if they do offer up anything, that we'll be over it. It's not generally just sort of we'll narrow in on any particular type of player. It's just mainly knowing that their list from inside out, see if there was anyone to come available.
As someone whose role it is to analyse footy talent and AFL lists, where do you see ours sitting now as compared to 6 weeks ago?
Well, we certainly, in the long-term strategy has been to get in some high-level talent. And also, at the same time, we don't really want to be getting any younger. And we certainly thought we addressed both of those needs. So I think we'll be a little bit better. I think what you'll see from the Saints is in maybe 2 or 3 years will be the time that we'll be looking at trying to be successful. But I mean, it's early days. We're certainly going to improve a little bit. We're going to add a little more depth and be a bit more pressure on players to perform. But I would think that we've got to be a little bit patient. We expect this to be a little bit better, but we're not getting over the top with it.
It seems like adding that experience and bigger body has been a clear strategy over the last couple of years. Is that something that has kind of been part of your roles to identify those bigger bodies and stronger guys? Yeah,
and I do a fair bit of work on other lists as well, where they all sit age demographic, games demographic. I like to look at the best 25 in each club and see where they sit with that. And we're clearly in the bottom 3 for age and games.
Yeah.
So it's an area we really need to get better at. So bringing in those more mature guys certainly helps. Even last year in the draft, we brought a few more mature age players in Hind and Parker and so forth. So we're trying to get that up a little bit, but at the same time not get caught out with too many players that are just role players within the club. We want to get high-end talent into the club at the same time.
So is Ben King, is his name still, I know he signed a contract, but as we said, it doesn't mean as much anymore. Does he still have an underline, a circle or an asterisk next to his name thinking that he'll be public target number 1?
Oh, look, I would think, Ben's playing some really good footy up there. You can see him developing into a really good player, and if he's going to be coming out of contract and he's a Victorian, he'll certainly be on our radar as well as probably 2 or 3 other clubs as well. So we'll certainly be doing the work and following him.
What is the day-to-day, I guess, boring things of your job look like? I mean, is it as simple as just watching tape and watching footy?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, during the week it is. It's just watching tape, looking at numbers. A lot of work as far as travel and organising travel and so forth. If you're going interstate, we have 2 or 3 part-timers that we use in all areas of our recruiting. So it's organising those guys as well. But yeah, most of the time it is coming in, having a look at the numbers, going to the vision, making sure you do the vision, cutting edits, putting packages together, doing all that along the way during the week.
And at what level does I guess, a player's character come into it, or is your role pure talent, skill level?
No. The character comes into it, but I mean, we've got a pretty good team of recruiters down there, and it's not just me. It's everybody gets involved with that sort of thing. If that's the case, so it's good to get feedback from others as well, not just me. I might have a contact that might know somebody or something, but one of the other boys in the recruiting department might have one as well. So we'll use all the other guys as well in that area. Yeah.
And game day, do you have much of a role during the game? Or
No, I don't.
Don't do anything?
No, I don't do anything game day. I'm basically at probably other grounds at the same time as we're playing anyway,
looking at other players, and
most of the time, yeah. Occasionally, we try and get our recruiters through the Saints games so that they get a feel for the list a bit better. I'm the same. Every now and then you watch a Saints game just to see what you think we need and get a better range on what type of player you might need to get into the club as well.
So the final one from me, and that's a good point. I was going to bring that up as to how much of your own side do you have to watch in terms of identifying that. But what is more pressure? You spoke about being on the board in the box with Rodney Eade and people like that. Do you prefer it sort of now, or would you? I guess do you miss a part of that sort of game day role that you've had?
Yeah, you do miss it. You do miss the game day role, but I mean, it's. I think week to week, when you do the opposition and stuff like that, there's deadline to meet, and it's quite a stressful role. Whereas recruiting, you've got really a full year to get things right, and it might be the biggest deadline you might have might be 2 or 3 weeks. Whereas when you do the box roles or opposition roles, it's a week to week proposition as far as getting everything done and ready to go, and got to make sure you got everything right. So that's probably a bit more pressure involved with that.
Well, the proof will ultimately be in the pudding, but St Kilda identified targets. They got them all. You've left, certainly at this point, a very satisfied supporter base with the work over the last few months. So well done on all of that, and good luck going forward. Hopefully it does generate rewards, but thanks for giving us some insights.
No worries. No problem. Thanks very much, guys.
Thanks, Steve.